Hey folks, how's it going? This is Iron Seagull here, back with another speculation video. So it's no secret that looking into many things as possible hints for future content within the Sims community is a really big topic. And sometimes I think it does go a little too far. But this speculation video is going to be a little bit different. Instead of looking at a very recent release and speculating as to whether a hint or not could be derived from something, I'm going to be looking back at Nifty Knitting from last year and look at what people were thinking were possible hints to a Generations expansion pack, and whether I feel they were really hints after all over a year later. It's also kind of interesting to think about, like, how long in general would the community consider something to be a hint? For example, in Get Together, on the DJ booth, one of the little visuals that can appear on the front is a dog. So that got people thinking that the Pets expansion pack might be next. But that's not what happened. We got City Living a year later, and then we got Cats and Dogs 2 years later. So at that point, was that hint in Get Together really a hint? Because I would personally say if it's more than a year later, no, it's not. Because 2 years I feel like is a little too long. Because if I were making The Sims personally and I wanted to actually hint at something, or if I were allowed to, then I would have that come true within a year. Because if you leave that sort of thing too long, then that leaves things more open to interpretation than they already are, and could just end up being sort of like a coincidence instead. Another example that's a little more extreme is how in the base game, from day one, we had that talk about vampires interaction, but we didn't get the vampires game pack until 2017, so that's a 3-year difference. Were they hinting vampires that far in advance? I don't think so. That, I think, is a coincidence, because vampires, I feel, are generally one of the most popular occults within the Sims franchise, so it was only natural, or supernatural, to expect that vampires were going to come back at some point. I don't think that was unreasonable to expect. But were they hinting at it with this one interaction? I don't think so. Though I will admit that was a weird interaction to put in the base game, and I would have not done that. But getting back to Nifty Knitting, there is one thing in the trailer that I think could have very well been a hint towards future content, and that is at the end of the trailer where this old lady is reminiscing about sledding, which was not in the game at the time. But then, a few months later, we did get it with Snowy Escape, so I think that does make sense. Also, in the Nifty Knitting livestream, SimGuru Connor did have a kinda sneaky look when he showed off the Reminisce interaction on the rocking chair and the sled showed up. Especially since this possible hint did come true within half a year, I'd be hard-pressed to just completely flat-out say, no, this was not a hint. I think there is a very high chance that it was a hint, a pretty sneaky one, and through a rather interesting method. But just before the Sim thinks about the sled, they think about these two Sims with a baby that's not in a bassinet. And in one of the official screenshots, you can also see a Sim thinking about a baby with a dog. And I don't think it's a toddler, even though there is a toddler off to the side of the screenshot. I think the toddler beside the dog would be a lot bigger if that were the case. So what people gleaned from that at the time is that we were getting hints for improved babies alongside a Generations expansion pack, because it would make a lot of sense for those things to happen at the same time. I was skeptical of this in the first place, but unless we somehow get Generations within the next maybe 3 months or so, I don't think this is a hint. I know another thing that popped up in those sort of like thought bubbles that were stylized was a high school, or at least some kind of school, and people were also taking that as a hint towards playable high schools, especially since that was also in a survey much earlier that year. But also, we gotta look at the context of this interaction itself, reminiscing on the rocking chair, which is only available to elders. So the gameplay purpose of it would be obviously that the elders are just looking back on these life moments. Though, yeah, with the sledding, that one is a bit more random than the others, especially considering that a lot of people don't really experience snow or sledding, let alone as a child. But other than that, I guess it isn't really that deep. They were just thinking of these really cute sort of moments to include, even if it did go outside of what the game actually has, since babies are still tied to bassinets. There is one different aspect of nifty knitting, though, that I would like to use to challenge even my own line of thinking that, hey, maybe I could be wrong about this. And it's that you can knit onesies for the babies, because before, you had no choice for what the babies would wear. I super highly doubt the sim gurus just were completely oblivious as to what they'd be implying by doing this feature. I do think we are going to get improved babies eventually. They're super highly requested, but I'm also wondering if this could also just be it. Like, this is as close as we're getting to improved babies, and it's like, okay, well, we're gonna give you these onesies as an extra in nifty knitting, but I don't know, it's really odd. I know at the time I was thinking, okay, this very strongly has a chance of being a hint for improved babies and them not being stuck in that bassinet anymore. There is one way that I could still maybe accept this as a hint though, because there is also the pandemic to consider. This might have slowed down pack production, so say if we did get improved babies within the next few months still, like January or February or even March, and it's like, okay, yeah, I guess I should give them a bit more leeway there. But I don't know, it's just, I wish there was a better way to really determine as to when we might get certain things. But until they maybe do something like they did when they hinted at bunk beds with that surprise reveal at the end of one of their live streams where they had that bunk bed in a silhouette, then it's just like, well, we're just left to grasp at straws with things like this. So in the end, unless it is a very, very explicit hint, like the bunk beds one that I just mentioned, I think it is very good to exercise a lot of caution when looking at something and thinking, wait, is this a hint to something? It's a very slippery slope, because if the sim gurus were to actually go out of their way to avoid putting anything in the game that could remotely hint to something that isn't supposed to be a hint towards anything at the near future, then there's a lot that they wouldn't be able to do, because you could even argue just the feature in general of elders being to reminisce on a rocking chair could be a hint towards a Generations expansion. But I think that stuff pack would have been less interesting without that interaction. Sure, it's not the main selling point, but I thought that was just a really cool touch that gave elders a bit more uniqueness to them. Heck, you could even say nifty knitting in general was a hint to Generations, because it is overall a pretty family-oriented pack. Or you could even say that knitting was hinting at a hobbies expansion pack like The Sims 2 Free Time, but a year later we still don't have that either. Yeah, we have Get Together, but it's not really the same kind of thing. That's more focused on clubs than actual hobbies. As cool as it would have been for me to be wrong and for nifty knitting to have hinted at a Generations expansion pack, as time goes on, it looks more and more that this was not the case at all. But still, like, come on, EA, you know a lot of people want Generations. It would make you serious bank. I don't know how many more times I need to say it before this finally becomes a reality.